In this video, I'm going to help you understand the difference between acid reflux and bile reflux. And if you're dealing with bile reflux, I'm going to help you understand what may be creating that problem and steps you can take to improve it. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
Now, I'm not a doctor, so don't view anything that you learn here as a replacement for seeking medical advice if you're in a situation where you need some help. I just want to give you some insights here that might help you understand what can go on with the body and create some of these problems. So when we're looking at bile reflux, it's not the same as acid reflux. When we're looking at acid reflux, we really want to understand this LES valve, or this lower esophageal sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus. It opens up when we eat food, the food comes in, and then it's supposed to close so that while that food is being acidified, those acids don't come back up and burn us and make us scream at the neighbors. So what's wrong with this acid reflux situation is that the problem is that this LES valve is triggered by stomach acid. And it's really common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid. So if someone's just making a little bit of stomach acid, but it's not enough to trigger this LES valve to close, then that small amount of acid that's being made is going to come back up and burn them, and then they're going to cuss a whole bunch. So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at acid reflux. It's usually a hypochlorhydria issue or a lack of stomach acid. But if that's new information for you, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on why do I have acid reflux, so you can dig deeper into understanding that situation. And there's some links below for some research that'll explain that a little bit better as well. But bile reflux is a different situation. So bile is a soapy substance that's made up here by the liver, and then it's stored down here in the gallbladder, where the gallbladder's job is to concentrate that bile. And then when we eat food, the bile is supposed to come down here into the duodenum. This is the first part of that small intestine. And the bile is supposed to help us emulsify our dietary fats so that we can use those fats and so that we can access fat-soluble vitamins. And the bile also comes down and neutralizes the acidic product that left the stomach. So when the food gets acidified correctly in the stomach and then it leaves and the bile comes down here to help neutralize those acids, the opposite pHs of that alkaline bile and the acidic product leaving the stomach creates like this sizzle when they collide. And that helps us really bust all the food apart and get all the nutrients out of that food. But when someone's experiencing bile reflux, this bile that's coming down here is then coming back up into the stomach. It shouldn't be going into the stomach. It doesn't belong there. So when we look up explanations of why this would be happening, you hear things like, oh, you have too much stomach acid in there, so the bile's coming up here to neutralize all those acids. You shouldn't have all those acids in your stomach. Your whole face is going to explode. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you understand how the digestive process works, why the stomach actually makes stomach acid to help us digest our food so that we can access the nutrients in the food that we're eating. When we can't acidify that food, we can't really break it down and get all the nutrients out of that food. So I have links in the description below about all the problems that can come from this hypochlorhydria issues. And the list is long. So there's a reason that our stomach makes stomach acid, and we want that to happen. We want to digest our food. So what we want to look at is why would this stuff be coming back up here? And that's when we want to look at this pyloric sphincter. So this is the LES valve up here, and there's another one down here at the bottom. So what happens is once this food is acidified in the stomach and leaves here, it's this acidic product entering to the duodenum that triggers this pyloric valve to close so that stuff doesn't go back up into the stomach. And it's also these acids coming down that triggers the gallbladder to squirt this alkaline bile down here to help neutralize those acids. It also triggers this to squirt some bicarb out here from the pancreas to help us neutralize those acids as well as other digestive enzymes we'll use. So it's this acidic action here in the duodenum that triggers these things to happen. And so what happens is a lot of people are not making enough stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. And they're not acidifying that food correctly, so the acid doesn't come down and trigger these other things to happen. So when this food is not acidic enough to trigger this sphincter to close correctly, then things are going to move the wrong direction. When bile comes down to help us emulsify the dietary fats we ate, then it can move in the wrong direction. And when this bile is going into the stomach, it's like this soapy detergent-like substance. And it's alkaline, so that can further alkalize the stomach. It can irritate all of the lining in the stomach because it's not meant to be alkaline there. It's not meant to have that soapy substance in here. The bile should be coming down here. It shouldn't be going into the stomach. So when it's going back in there, it can create a whole lot of trouble. So if bile is flowing back up into the stomach, that's going to even further alkalize the stomach and restrict your ability to acidify that food. It's also going to restrict your ability to acidify the stomach enough to trigger that LES valve to close. That's why it's so common to see people with acid reflux and bile reflux, or even bile reflux gastritis. And this bile reflux gastritis is when this bile is coming back up here and there's a lot of inflammation in the stomach. That inflammation in the stomach can be quite painful. It can be quite not a bucket of fun. But if the problem is that this valve is not closing correctly and this stuff is refluxing back up into the stomach, is it really the bile's fault? Is taking steps to reduce bile going to trigger this valve to close? So another interesting thing to look at is that when you look at gastritis, it really seems to correlate with these H. pylori infections that happen in the stomach. And H. pylori is a bacteria that can come in and create a whole lot of trouble. And the trick is that H. pylori can get in when there's not enough stomach acid to wipe them out. That stomach acid doesn't just help us break down our food, it's the barrier to the whole digestive system. So when bacteria is coming in on the food that we're eating, and it's coming in, we're not going to stop that from happening, but when it comes in, it's supposed to die in an acid bath from that stomach acid. But when that barrier of acid is not there, the bacteria come in, they set up camp, they have a keg party, they raise their kids, it's a great time. But this H. pylori has the ability to create a lot of trouble in the stomach and is very common to see with gastritis. So if you are dealing with gastritis issues, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on gastritis, a different viewpoint, and that'll kind of walk you through a little bit more of that. But it's just good to understand what's going on when we're seeing these issues that can come about with a lack of stomach acid, and we're also seeing this bile reflux problem. And it probably might not be a coincidence that we're seeing that this valve won't close correctly when there's not enough stomach acid, because it's this acid in the duodenum that's supposed to trigger that pyloric valve to close in the first place. We'll also put some links to some research below where there's a big correlation between people who are dealing with bile reflux and those who have gallstones. And when someone has gallstones, we know that bile is not flowing correctly because the bile is staying in the gallbladder and continue to concentrate until it concentrates into stones. And someone's bile not flowing correctly is very common. So is it a problem where the bile's not coming down as well that causes it to go back up? Or is it the fact that the bile is not being called on because the food is not being acidified correctly? If it's not being acidified and coming down here and triggering the gallbladder to squirt that alkaline bile down to help neutralize those acids, then the bile would stay in there longer and get more concentrated. So we see another correlation, and I'm not saying that this is the cause of this, but when we're seeing a lot of these correlations between a lack of stomach acid and problems with bile and bile going up the wrong place and bile turning into stones, it seems to be a pretty big coincidence. So what do you do if you're dealing with this issue? And I can't really tell you what steps you should take because you can see that the situation could be different from person to person. But you might want to start investigating, is stomach acid working correctly? Because it's really common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid, and there's steps that people can take to improve that function. And chapters 3 and 4 of my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, walk you through how to figure out, are there aspects of digestion that are not working correctly? And if so, what steps can I take to improve those? And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free. And if somebody is dealing with gastritis, they want to watch our video in the description about gastritis to understand steps that you can take to improve that inflammation before you start to improve stomach acid if your body isn't making enough as it is. If there's an overgrowth of bacteria in the stomach that's reducing the ability to acidify that stomach, then you want to take steps to improve those. And we have a video on steps you can take to wipe out bacteria in the stomach, and we'll put the link to that video in the description below as well. And then you want to make sure that bile is flowing correctly so that it can come down here and neutralize these acids and it's not flowing in the wrong direction. Since we're seeing that correlation of poor bile flow issues with things like gallstones and bile reflux, we really want to take steps to thin that bile so that it can flow the way that it's supposed to flow. And we have a video for 5 ways to improve bile flow, and we'll put that in the description below this video too. But before a person can really take steps, they don't want to take steps just because they have some symptom. They really want to know what's going on with their body. So the most important thing is to figure out which aspects of digestion may not be working correctly. So jump over right now and check out our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid and our other video on 10 signs of poor bile flow, and figure out if either of those sides of digestion are malfunctioning, and then you'll know where you really want to start to create improvement. Let us know how it goes.